What's the AUM that you currently manage at Mahindra Manulife AMC?
It's about 32,000 crores now, plus another $300-400 million that we advise overseas clients.
So you've worked at Birla Sun Life, you've then worked at Morgan Stanley, you've worked at Bank of Baroda, and now you're the MD and CEO at Mahindra AMC as well. What has been your best investment and worst investment throughout the last 30 plus years?
वो जो best investment है, it's probably up, मतलब I don't even do the math, maybe up 30x, 40x, I don't know. Equally true for the other investment. That stock has been down 96 to 98% from my purchase price.
You said that you bought a house and you moved back to the original house. So you again sold that house?
Yes, I did.
Was it a bad financial decision of buying a house?
No. It turned out eventually to be a great financial decision. I think I sold it at a 10x.
What? Seriously?
Yeah.
For most people who are watching this, जो young retail investors है, वो अभी 20 to 23 year old है, and they've just started their first job with a salary of 50,000 per month. अभी आप उनको क्या recommend करोगे कि कितने टाइप के फंड्स में इन्वेस्ट करना चाहिए एंड कैसे आइडेंटिफाई करना है कौन सा फंड उनके लिए बना हुआ है?
I have a very simple formula. No need to think about investing in across more than 6 or 7 or 8 mutual fund companies. Within that, typical mix of flexi cap, multi cap and multi asset. ये तीनों में कर लीजिए. A retail investor will actually add no value to themselves if they invest in any funds beyond this.
You also addressed about the misinformation spread by Finfluencers on social media. What's your take on that?
This is a very controversial. I can't get the right answer in front of somebody who's one of the biggest influencers out there.
वीडियो देखने से पहले मेरी एक रिक्वेस्ट है आप सबसे. मैं YouTube एनालिटिक्स देख रहा था एंड वहां पर देखा कि 82.6% ऑफ माय ऑडियंस हु इज वाचिंग दिस कंटेंट हैज नॉट सब्सक्राइब टू द चैनल. अगर मैंने आपको थोड़ी सी वैल्यू प्रोवाइड की होगी एंड आपको अगर कंटेंट बहुत अच्छा लग रहा है, आई रिक्वेस्ट ऑल ऑफ यू टू प्लीज हिट द सब्सक्राइब बटन सो दैट वी कैन ब्रिंग यू द बेस्ट क्वालिटी ऑफ गेस्ट एंड गिव यू द मैक्सिमम वैल्यू पॉसिबल. थैंक यू सो मच फॉर सब्सक्राइबिंग टू आवर चैनल एंड एंजॉय दिस एंटायर एपिसोड ऑफ कॉन्वर्सेशन विद कुशल. तो सर आपका इन्वेस्टिंग जर्नी थोड़ा डिस्कस करते हैं. लाइक आपने म्यूचुअल फंड इन्वेस्टमेंट कब से शुरू किया था या इन्वेस्टिंग जर्नी कैसे शुरू हुआ था? स्टॉक्स में इन्वेस्ट किया था, म्यूचुअल फंड्स में किया था, एंड हाउ डिड इट स्टार्ट ऑल ओवर?
So Kushal, it started, frankly, my family, I've been brought up in a period where my dad always has been an investor. Like he was a public sector servant, didn't earn a lot, but I know he used to invest gradually in equity. And I remember every Saturday, Sunday, he used to sit in a journal and note. So the habit of investing in equity came in. The second thing is that I started reading newspapers very avidly, including the Economic Times. आधा मुझे समझ में नहीं आता था, but I used to read it. So my first investment I remember was in a company. And I think मेरा आदत ये है कि अभी भी मैं वो करता हूँ. Maybe to describe, I'm a value investor. तो मैं I used to read वो Economic Times का जो market pages था. I used to read जिसका 52 week low हुआ है. मुझे लगता था कि बस 52 week low है ना तो वो बड़ा opportunity है. So I remember this was I've been seeing investing in my family from the 80s. मेरा age भी थोड़ा unfortunately वहाँ से describe हो जाता है, but first investment, if I remember, probably early 90s. This was the time of the first bull market. There was a company called Bihar Alloys. It had hit a 52-week low. I think I must have done some kind of reading that I could, but you can't find much then, right? This was not the days of the internet. I bought it. If I think about access to information, it was clearly not something to buy, but in those days, whatever you bought worked. So I think I remember selling it at 4x eventually in 2-3 years. So that's my first investment journey that I distinctly remember. And like I said, I would argue that after 30 years of an investing career, maybe मेरा DNA वही है. You search for value. So if something market is saying कि boss इसको बेच दो, इसको लो मत, मेरा इंस्टिंक्ट होता है कि बॉस इसमें देखना चाहिए.
इन्वेस्टिंग में आपका इंटरेस्ट कैसे डेवलप हुआ स्टॉक मार्केट्स में स्पेसिफिकली?
Because like I said, I mean, sometimes they say na कि it's really family upbringing, which is unusual because I'm actually a Catholic boy from Bandra. So you wouldn't think कि investing in equity comes very naturally. But like I said, my father has been a person who I've seen many such investors during my actual career. Those people who believe buy a stock, hold it for 20-30 years, blue chips are forever, wo wala philosophy. So through the 80s, I've always seen him do that. On the weekend, he would sit and buy stocks little by little, maybe theoretically SIP का theory मैंने वहाँ से सीखा है. right? Because he didn't have the money to make big bang purchases. But I also remember in some conversations, he was always a buyer, never a seller. So he would actually just take whatever money and keep buying, keep buying, keep buying. When he passed away a couple of years ago, I realized that there are many of the stocks that I have seen him buying during his days of journaling that he still had.
Oh, wow.
He still had. I mean, in fact, I would say 70% of his portfolio was bought in the 80s and 90s.
So 30, 40 plus years of holding.
Yeah. And so you'll have multi-baggers, crazy multi-baggers. You'll have disasters all mixed in one. But as they say that, आप समय देते हो कुछ चीज के लिए ना, the multi-baggers create so much wealth in a sense. And I'm not describing him, it's not like he was very, very rich, but I'm saying it far outweighed the kind of mistakes that you could make.
Can you give an example of one of the multi-bagger stocks which he held for
so I remember one, which is, and if you think about it, so he used to work in the insurance industry, in New India Assurance, and one of his key clients was Indian Hotels. So I remember him saying that I think the then chairman of Indian Hotels, or maybe he was a senior executive, Mr. Kerkar, who is a very well-known doyen in Indian Hotels, had told him कि Heredia ji, you should buy this stock as well. So I remember him buying Indian Hotels maybe month after month, and I don't think he sold any of it till the time he passed. I mean, it's his largest holding. It was his largest holding. And when you think about it, it's a great company to have bought, right? And invested in. So yeah, that I remember that.
तो आपने चार्टर्ड अकाउंटेंसी किया है एंड यू आर आल्सो अ रैंक होल्डर इन योर सीए एग्जाम्स. तो आपका सीए का और बीकॉम का जर्नी कैसे रहा था एंड आपने क्या सीखा है वो पूरे फेज से?
I would say the first thing I probably remember is, and ये सब चीजें बहुत मतलब as you get older theoretically मतलब आप wiser बन जाते हो ना. So academically I was quite bright. I mean, in school I would not say a topper, but typically I would be in the first 3 in class. But then when I went to college, I would say, now in corporate life, लोग बोलते हैं ना work-life balance. उस टाइम पे then you could argue कि student life balance. So maybe when I went to college, I decided कि there is something called life and it is better than academics. So, and I'll tell you another story about it during my first interview after CA. But so I finished my BCom. I went to NM College, which is typically a college where there are lots of very academically gifted people, high rankers, etc. I was clearly not one of the high rankers there, and I decided life was always nice. So I finished BCom, and I was enjoying life so much that मैंने किसी MBA का entrance भी नहीं दिया, because I was doing some bit of running, this, that, etc. But understand, my parents were middle class, hardworking parents. Typically conversation in offices है, आपका बेटा क्या कर रहा है, वो IIT जा रहा है, ये भी JTI जा रहा है, ये CA कर रहा है. तो if somebody asked my father कि आपका बेटा क्या कर रहा है, वो I don't know. So then my parents asked me कि what do you plan to do? Because at the end of the day, graduation is one thing. So I said ठीक है, मैं post graduation I'll do. बोले बट आपने MBA का कोई एंट्रेंस तो दिया नहीं. So then the only obvious thing for a commerce graduate is आप CA कर लो. I had no thought in my mind कि CA कितना tough होगा. I'll tell you again ये सब when you get wiser. My parents made a call. I used to live in Bandra. My parents made a call. My dad, and I can tell you, it's when I think about it, आप बोलते ना parent का sacrifice. We moved to Malabar Hill because my father was senior enough that he could get a company flat in Malabar Hill. So just at the time of my final year of BCom, we moved to Malabar Hill. अभी आप ये सोचिए, आज का social media का ज़माना तो है नहीं. So when you move after living for 15, 16, 17 years, you don't that easily make new friends. So now you have started. So in some sense, ये में जो hard work चाहिए होता है, in some ways my parents by making that move made sure कि वो time मेरे पास आ गया, because if I was in Bandra, every day I would have found a reason to go down, play, do whatever. So I think that's the first starting point. Second starting point came from, again, another family member who said, so she had a CA firm that was auditing their company. And I had started my articleship in a smallish firm, but nice, very good firm, learning तो बहुत था. तो उसने वहाँ, I think वो senior partner, जो today is one of my best friends, by the way. तो वो जो पार्टनर उसको पूछा कि अरे यार ये सीए में लोग इट्स वेरी टफ ना, बोला हाँ टफ है, तो कितना आपके जो आर्टिकल्स है कितने पास होते हैं? नहीं नहीं हमारे यहाँ तो पास होते हैं, बिकॉज वी आर एसबी बिलम हो रहा। सो माई आंट बिकेम कि बॉस कैसे भी करके बोला मेरा एक नेव्यू है, वो एकेडमिकली ब्राइट है, लेकिन शी डिडंट वांट टू एक्सप्लेन कि बॉस 60% in BCom, so maybe she convinced him and he got me into SB Bilmore, and I joined and I realized that boss academically I was nowhere close to the kind of people who were in my batch. But when we went for audits, it was not कि I didn't know stuff and they knew stuff. So somewhere you could say कि वो जो unsaid ambition होता है ना कि boss I'm actually good enough, that's what I think flipped. And I would give a very, I think not too many people in the history of CA should say this. I actually have a higher percentage in CA in both inter and final, and I ranked both inter and final than I had in BCom. And I also know कि मेरा instinct ये almost final तक ना, people से अगर आप पास होंगे तो आपको रैंक आएगा, लेकिन आप पास होगे कि नहीं पता नहीं, because my CA mark sheet used to be very bizarre. I used to have 2 subjects in the 80s and 2 subjects barely passing 40, तो मतलब average कुछ 63 64, तो उसमें तो उस जमाने में I'm guessing maybe now also with a 63 64 आपको रैंक आ जाता है।
आपको सीए में ज्यादा परसेंट थे बीकॉम से?
या
वाओ,
So
मैंने कभी सुना नहीं है ऐसा कि बीकॉम में किसी
no,
को कम है सीए में ज्यादा है।
and in my case not once twice. So
हाँ.
both inter and final my mark sheet percentage is higher than BCom, which kind of says the extent to which मैंने life चुना in college, which I don't regret. मुझे एक और incident मेरे को याद है, typically मेरा this I passed out in 95, which is the time where CA Institute also started the process of campus recruitment. उस टाइम पे वो था नहीं, उस टाइम पे तो आई थिंक व्हाट यूज्ड टू बी द प्रैक्टिस इज सम ऑफ द बिगर बेटर कंपनीज वो रैंकर का लिस्ट दे यूज्ड टू टेक फ्रॉम द इंस्टीट्यूट एंड दे यूज्ड टू कॉल फॉर इंटरव्यूज. माइन आई थिंक वाज आइदर द फर्स्ट ईयर और सेकंड ईयर में जहां एक्चुअल कैंपस रिक्रूटमेंट था. And just to be fair, I don't want to name the company, but it was one of the best companies that you would. And I used to clear the GD because, see, one of the things is that I was a decent talker. So क्या है कि GD round में you can speak, and it's probably unfair comment to say, but the GD rounds are conducted in English. For me, English is a native language, right? So very naturally you will be able to converse. So I would virtually reach the final of every possible thing. तो मैं ये बड़ी company में surprisingly, because my rank by the way was not very high, it was like some 40. So typically you would think that company will shortlist people who are 2nd, 5th, 10th, whatever. So but I landed. And he took a look at my mark sheet and said, Mr. Heredia, are you good at math? तो मैं बोला नहीं सर ठीक है, लेकिन अगर मैं मैथ में इतना अच्छा होता तो मैं साइंस ले लेता. तो नहीं, because I am looking at your academic record, it's a perfect declining graph. And I'm not joking, Kushal, when I realized it ना, I'll give you a reason why I said it. कि मेरा 10th का मार्क था 85, मेरा 12th था 72.5 और मेरा बीकॉम था 60. So I was like, it is what it is. मतलब
फिर आपने क्या आंसर दिया, क्या हुआ फिर?
नहीं, मैंने बोला see it's no, actually see back in those days when you're a 22-year-old, you are not prepared for those kind of comments. So I don't want to pretend कि मेरे को तो एक suddenly एकदम smart ass answer आया था. Because it's not something that it struck me at that point कि अच्छा ठीक है, that's actually reality. Suffice to say मुझे वो नौकरी नहीं मिली. हाँ, it's not one of those fairy tales में happy ending है ना कि हाँ ठीक है, it's clear you have potential. No, I didn't get selected.
What do you think worked really well for you? Because आपको दोनों में रैंक आया, CA इंटर में, CA फाइनल में. तो आपको क्या लगता है कि क्या ऐसा था जो डिसिप्लिन या फोकस या कंसंट्रेशन जो आपको हेल्प किया in order to get a rank in CA finals despite getting 60% in BCom?
No, see, like I said, I think somewhere, and this could be a मतलब शायद एक अनफेयर कमेंट भी कह सकते हैं, लेकिन आई एम नॉट श्योर आवर एकेडमिक सिस्टम नेसेसरली एटलीस्ट टिल ग्रेजुएशन is a fair reflection of what you can and cannot do.
Why?
Because I think it probably rewards hard work, continuous practice a lot more. But अभी नहीं, it's not कि CA में hard work नहीं चाहिए, वो तो इसमें तो you need a lot more hard work. But if you actually have potential which you have chosen not to use in graduation, even if my perspective is that if I had worked a lot harder in BCom, studied a lot more, perhaps 60 would have become 80. But if let's say I would have said, is that my potential could be to get 90, it would have still remained 80. I think the difference is in CA mein the combination of hard work, the fact that you are working in a CA firm that's very reputed, which means the audit exposure, consulting exposure, also giving you practical experience. I think वो सब combination है. And probably you could argue कि boss commerce graduation के time पे I didn't go to college that often. In my CA तो then you have peers. Peers kind of enforces competition. तो अगर आप you are saying that चलो मेरे को 3 months या 2.5 months का study leave है, it's not कि you'll call your colleagues and they're all saying चलो party करते हैं. Everybody is taking opportunity to study. So you have no choice. Then you're like, boss, ठीक है, मैं भी करूँ. And like I said, it's clear when I was in school, I have always figured out to be in the top 2-3. So actually I would guess I'm academically okay, right? So I honestly, Kushal, genuine answer, I don't know. I mean, if I was to add one thing, and I'm I wouldn't call myself as spiritual, but there is a God, no? So sometimes you have to credit divine blessing, you credit luck. Maybe that's all of it, because I said to you, कि मतलब मेरा mark sheet in CA, on one hand you can say कि चलो 63%, but I had a couple of 41s and 42s. And being a CA yourself, it's not a lot of difference between a 39 and a 42. Unfortunately, apna institute is not very kind.
What's the biggest sacrifice you would have done in your CA journey, if you recall?
After I started doing it, I still used to go back to Bandra once in a while, because naturally that's where all my friends are. I remember once being very unceremoniously booted out. We were going out. उसने बोला तू घर जा भाई. तो मैं बोला मैं क्यों घर जाऊँ भाई, हम बाहर जा रहे हैं ना. बोलते नहीं तू CA कर रहा है. मैं बोला बॉस you guys are just about graduates. बोलते हाँ, so you are doing the post graduation for all of us. So you represent our post graduation dreams, bhai. So I'm so sorry, but you go. So I'm just saying, it is not that I was sitting with friends who would have said, boss, we should just have a good time. They all were very clear कि boss, हम 8 या 10 लोग में से, you have some talent to do something, just because you are going to be happy partying with us. Sorry, you go. And I remember the kind of joy when I became a CA that some of them had. It was almost as if un log CA ban gaye. Right? So I think it's a combination. So I do not, when you ask the question sacrifice, actually that word does not come to me. I think it's just motivation from very unlikely places, and then वो हो गया. But I would say that that's a turning point, because जब से वो that journey happened, मेरे खुद की personal perspectives on, I started to think कि boss चलो मैं क्या career करूँ. So for example, when I was doing CA, I also realized that I was probably not cut out for this. I should have probably done an MBA in retrospect, maybe given the kind of person I was. And I was kind of quite upset that CA is a kind of typecast. And frankly, you're a great example of how that typecast doesn't work, right? Given the amazing work you do in content. I mean, maybe you will empathize. You tell me कि there is this kind of typecast कि आप CA हो बहुत, you guys are masters of the back office. That's the kind of, and back in our zamana, that was the only way people described it. Back office, front office. And I was very clear, even in the 3 years of outstanding articleship I did, कि boss, I don't think I can do back office for a long time. So I actually did not take up any job I got, even in that campus recruitment, because they were all, some of them were great companies, but they were all back office. And I picked the only front office job I got, which was in the mutual fund industry. Because if you think about it, back in 95, financial, and let's say I was intelligent or smart enough to believe कि boss मुझे financial services में काम करना है, because I had a bit of markets because of my dad, because I had also invested. तो financial services tick box yes, front office tick box yes. अभी एक chartered accountant says financial services front office, लेकिन नौकरी कौन देगा? Because consumer finance was a big thing then. Investment banking has always been a big thing, remains a big thing. Consulting, so on and so forth. So naturally, you can't get into front office there. The fund industry was probably, in terms of pecking order, not one of the largest parts of financial services. So ironically, that's why I got that front office opportunity that I got, which is in retrospect, again, I guess a massive blessing from above.
No, firstly, thank you so much for your kind words for the work that I'm doing. But I wanted to touch upon the MBA thing which you mentioned. तो आपने बताया कि अगर MBA करते आप तो मतलब better भी हो जाता या तो you thought that you could have done MBA. At present, since you're the vice chairman of AMFI as well and you've been a veteran in the industry since 30 plus years, अभी कैसे talent pool आ रहा है? Like what are you seeing कि MBAs preferred हो रहे हैं, CAs preferred हो रहे हैं या like is it like skills ज़्यादा important है degree से? तो कैसे talent pool कैसे recruit हो रहा है?
I think the emphasis now is still much more on skills, because you think about our industry, whether you at CXO levels, there are CAs and MBAs who are occupying a lot of those CXO positions. You could argue कि virtually 50-50 split है. So to believe कि academic qualification should give you direction कि boss ये MBA ये कर सकता है, CA नहीं कर सकता, I think is false. I think it's somebody who has talent, potential, has a postgraduate qualification, because I think Kushal it opens the door. That's all it does. उसके बाद work experience and how you take advantage of that work experience to build on your skills is what matters. I mean, some of the finest fund managers I know are chartered accountants. Some of the finest fund managers I know are engineers. Some of the finest fund managers I know are MBAs. There is no fit and fast rule. Some of the finest operations back office people I know, one or two of them are MBAs, which I would say is even more perplexing in that sense. मतलब ठीक है, there are enough number of very qualified CAs in our own industry. You take Navneet, Nilesh Bhai, all of these guys, right? I mean, but you would think back office to CA संभाल सकते हैं. But I've seen some very talented MBAs. I mean, you look at CFO. In my days, CFO used to be a route for a CA to go, but today some of the biggest CFOs are MBAs. So I think it's no longer a question of, I think academic qualifications is good to a point, but उसके बाद तो skills, experience, attitude, approach, that's what you look for.
And आपने अभी जैसे पूरा आपका career has been like in the mutual fund industry over the last 30 plus years. So आपने बताया कि you got your first job in Birla Sun Life at that point in time?
Yes, it was Birla Capital then it became Birla Sun Life.
Got it. And then so you've worked at Birla Sun Life, you've then worked at Morgan Stanley, you worked at Bank of Baroda, and now you're the MD and CEO at Mahindra, AMC as well. तो इसमें आपके जो पूरे मतलब जो म्यूचुअल फंड जर्नी भी है, what has been your best investment and worst investment throughout the last 30 plus years? What went right in the best investment and what went wrong in the worst investment?
So actually, it's going to be very bad advertising for our industry in a sense, because I'm hoping in the conversation हम कहेंगे कि boss, are mutual funds relevant, करना चाहिए, कैसा करना चाहिए, etc. But if I was to answer that specific question, unfortunately, both my best and worst investments are direct equity stocks, right?
Oh, okay.
And I'm fond of telling people this, that actually, I would say over the last 30 years, both of them have occurred in the last 8-9 years. And if I think about it, both of them have occurred in the same year. Of purchase point, dono same hai. Now, I actually have stopped doing direct equity for probably the last 3-4 years. And even over the last 10-15 years, if you work in the fund industry, it is, firstly, you understand that beyond a point doesn't make sense. Plus, you work in the industry, there are all kinds of norms, etc. So I've learned to trust the industry a long time ago. And we can come to that. I have some very weird, strange philosophies on that. But my best investment, worst investment still shows in my Demat account. And I tell people that both of them I keep and I don't touch for a reason, and I'll tell you why. वो जो best investment है, it's probably up. I don't even do the math. मतलब it may be up 30x, 40x. I don't know, right? In the last 1.5 year, as I've got finally wiser, मैंने कुछ नहीं किया. But till that time, I would say at least 5 बार मैंने सोचा कि बॉस ये स्टॉक तो बहुत रन अप हो गया, इसको बेचना चाहिए. And then something happened. Could be anything. मतलब Kushal has called me for a podcast. मुझे ऑफिस से निकलना पड़ा. Then I didn't sell it. Whatever. And I realized that each one of the times मुझे लगा कि बॉस ये बहुत रन अप हो गया, इसको बेचना चाहिए. That company has surprised me, and it is very good. I didn't do anything because that company has gone on stride to stride. Share price has also gone on stride to stride. So it kind of gives me a perspective कि boss, sometimes just if you are invested in a great business, even if sometimes stock price moves ahead of itself, ठीक है, keep it, because eventually, as long as it's a great business and continues becoming great, the stock price may fall 20% because थोड़ा overpriced है, but eventually 5 साल के बाद it will still be a lot more, right? So you kind of learn patience and timing, and it serves as a reminder to me. I need that because otherwise I don't sometimes practice what I preach. Equally true for the other investment. Like I said, probably both were done in maybe 2014-15 time frame. So it's about 10 years. That stock has been down 96 to 98% from my purchase price pretty much for the last 3-4 years. Now, अभी आप सोचोगे boss, you are an investment guy. Is it that आपको लगा 3 साल पहले कि ये बढ़ने वाला है? मैं बोला नहीं. I think ये तो यहाँ ही रहेगा या शायद और भी गिर सकता है. But I keep it as a reminder to myself कि boss ये आपका बस की बात actually नहीं है. Because if you have the talent to discover a stock that can fall 97%, perhaps doing direct equity is not your cup of tea, kind of thing. So that's the story. My best and worst both sit in my portfolio even today. I probably don't have more than 10 direct equity stocks, but 2 are these. And maybe I will keep them for the next 10 years. Maybe the best one I probably at some point will start exiting at some level. Because it happens to be a technology company, and maybe that's a space that keeps evolving. But वो worst वाला मैं रखूंगा. Because it will remind me about the मतलब कभी कभार जो basic tenets of investing ना, harsh reality teaches you far more than anything else. Because अगर मैंने बेच दिया, after 3 years maybe I'll get some more courage कि बस मुझे आता है.
वैसे भी वो 98% डाउन है तो इट्स ऑलमोस्ट गॉन.
हाँ, तो मतलब how much can 98
बेचा नहीं भी बेचा तो इट्स ऑलमोस्ट गॉन. दैट्स आल्सो वन थिंग.
It actually, funnily enough, it actually doubled in the last 1 year. So मतलब I think that's why 98 has become 96.
You know, this is so interesting. So आप बोल रहे हो कि वो लास्ट 2 साल में 100% इंक्रीज हो गया है. बट अगर आप ओरिजिनल से कंपेयर करोगे तो वो 98 से 96% ही डाउन है. तो लाइक दिस इज द रूल ऑफ इन्वेस्टिंग. लाइक व्हेन समथिंग गोज डाउन बाय 50%, it has to go up by 100% to reach the original level.
And I could have got the math wrong because, like I said, see, beyond a point for me, this is not about the numbers. This is about the practical lessons of life, right? So मैं क्या बोल रहा हूँ कि it's like 500 rupee का stock is 20 rupees or 10 rupees. So 10 rupees has become 20 rupees. But you know, it's still so 480 अभी 480 का loss हुआ, पहले 490 का loss.
Right. तो सर इसमें like can we delve deeper into the framework of what all you evaluate before, let's say, investing anywhere? So क्या क्या factors होते हैं? With if you can give an example and explain, that'll be amazing. कि numbers क्या देखते हो, management quality क्या देखते हो, how do you assess if it's a good company, good like investment, and what all happens through the framework?
So Kushal, I'll give it to you with the company I currently work in, because that's the framework that we really use. So we have a framework called GCMV, which is growth, cash flow, management, and valuation. These are the 4 parameters. And if you ask me, across the many companies I've worked in, mota moti investing in equity kind of, I would believe, looks at these 4 parameters. Nomenclatures may be different, right? So you are going to want to, when you're analyzing a company, you want to understand or develop some understanding कि ये company का growth prospects क्या है. Because ultimately, if I'm paying a price earning multiple for something, I am a big believer in the peg ratio. मतलब अगर मैं, if I'm paying a PE of 30, I can't be paying a PE of 30 for a company growing at 5%, right? So there has to be growth that is embedded in the business model or the direction of the business. The second, which is very critical, is the management. And some people use the word governance, some people quality sochte, but I'm just saying combination of vision and execution. What is the management thinking about? And somebody may say that this is now, I am giving a very institutional answer, but not really, because today there are websites where any normal person, if they want, can read con call transcripts, right? Quarterly con call transcripts, and what management is thinking about their business. Over time, you can form an opinion in terms of how those managements are in terms of vision, execution, skill, etc. So, second part. Third is cash flow, because we believe that eventually that's the truth serum, right? P&Ls are there on it's there on an Excel sheet, but hard cash in the bank reflects a lot more. And fourth is valuation. It's always a good thing to be mindful about valuation, because that could make or break how much you make from this. So those are the four parameters. I don't think those majorly different hai from most investment people. Where we are slightly different, and we believe we kind of think about it, is we use a fifth element, which is kind of a common word called catalyst. Like, what are the catalysts that are going to come in which may change any of these parameters for the better, most particularly the business? Is it a government policy? Is it a macro opportunity? शायद चाइना का import policies change हो गया, maybe it's some other government. It's typically a macro catalyst that perhaps, there can be a policy around recycling that will spell certain opportunities for certain companies. It will not. So there is always a catalyst you may want to look at that allows you to have confidence that this company's prospects will change. And what is important is we also look at it both sides. So I'm not saying कि हम सिर्फ positive तरह से सोचते हैं. Sometimes there can be a catalyst on the negative as well. Right? I will give you an example. As you know, in our industry, we can't specifically talk about stocks, right? But I think this is about 2 years ago, government announced windfall tax. Now, that's what I would describe as a catalyst, right? Because you are, for example, if you've been buying metal stocks, आपको लगता है कि the way metal prices are globally, etc., ये opportunity है for companies to earn disproportionate profits. But the moment you have a catalyst called windfall tax, why I'm saying it's a catalyst? Because windfall tax is a financial number. You can do the ganit. Tax इतना है, तो अगर आपके हिसाब से profit was going to grow from 10 to 20, that profit is now going to grow from 10 to 16. But to me, the catalyst is that given the importance of this space, the government is going to control the extent to some degree to which profits can be made, because there are certain elements of its importance to the broader economy, etc. So me, that's a catalyst to say that this is not a one-way story. There is a limitation, and perhaps therefore being overly optimistic on this may not make sense.
What is a windfall tax?
So windfall tax is when basically the government announced an extra tax on top of which I think got changed only about 6 months ago, that you have to pay an extra tax because of the sheer opportunity that was there. And that windfall tax helped the government, I would say, mitigate to some degree the oil prices and so on and so forth.
So if you can just delve deeper into the GCMV framework, and although I know you can't take individual stock names, but GCMV framework में like with an example, I got all the 4 points, but with an example आप बता सकते हो कि okay, growth है तो this should be the percentage, cash flow है तो okay, these are the ratios we check, maybe operating cash flow to profit or EV, like EV to operating cash flow, etc. थोड़ा deep में in terms of what are like the specific nuances you look for in every factor.
Let me give you an example. One of the spaces that we have been, we saw, I think we were one of the earlier guys. We did simple math and said that if you think about what we are discussing in terms of our economy, This was 2-3 years back. $3 trillion economy. Most likely in 5-7 years we'll become a $6-7 trillion economy. India will be the third largest economy in the world, etc., etc. I remember my investment team doing some back calculation and saying, okay, for this to happen, and obviously there was a lot of impetus on manufacturing, make in India, etc., etc. They came to the conclusion by 27 or 28, we would probably not be making enough power for us to actually be able to run to this $6-7 trillion. Which then means कि power sector, जो typically is seen as a defensive structure, it's a value play, it kind of is ticking the box on the most obvious growth. Because if anything I can create more capacity is going to have demand, then that's the biggest example of a growth stock, right? So effectively, I remember a particular company we looked at to say that therefore, whatever incremental productivity gains this company can have, assures it a very predictable growth over the next 5-10 years. That number was not 20% because obviously power companies cannot expand at 20% every year, right? So maybe it is that a company then growing at 9-10% versus historically a company that grew at 3-5%. Right. So the way we look at growth is more relative rather than absolute. That's point number one.
Okay.
Now, once we've thought about that, so like I said, two perspectives, neither of them financial. One is there an opportunity to grow faster than what is expected of such a company or such a sector? And is there an opportunity to grow faster for longer? Because longer and the third element, if I was to do it, is what extent of confidence I will have around this, right? If those three parameters are being met, I would say the growth metric is being ticked. The second is management, right? You then want to understand what is the management thinking in terms of this particular opportunity. How is it walking the talk? So that's why I think when I refer to this execution, one is to understand the vision and the mission of the management, which they're happy to discuss what they see as the opportunity, etc. But then are they being able to execute on that mission and vision consistently? Are they also a management that constantly is looking to rethink and reinvent as we go along? Because no opportunity is static, right? This is a very dynamic world we are living in. So I would say that's a subjective judgment you make. There is no such metric you would use and start giving rank out of 10.
I agree, but can you give an example of a good management versus a bad management? Like, I understand that they should be able to meet the vision, mission, rethink, reinvent. But what would be an example कि हाँ उन्होंने ये किया इसलिए हमें लगा कि ये good management है, उन्होंने ये नहीं किया इसलिए हमें लगा कि ये bad management है. Of course, without naming anyone.
I will give you a simple example. This is an example now that unfortunately I have to go back 25 years. But to me, examples are in the .com time. How many companies changed their word to XYZ IT Limited when they were nothing to do with IT? That's an example of bad management. You're trying to capture trends, right? So today, for example, somebody says the word AI because it's a good thing to say. But in reality, what examples will I be able to understand that you actually used AI? So I would rather trust a management that has actually not used AI to a large degree, but is clearly on a path, and you can keep incrementally seeing that journey. And somebody else says, boss, we are going to use it to transform. And then 6 months later, you realize that nothing really has changed, right? So to my mind, that's the descriptor because, see, I hesitate to, in equities, when you are investing, my belief is that you have to have an optimistic, positive mindset. Because also maybe because, and again, I'm going to use a technical word, pardon me, we are long only guys. हम hedge fund नहीं है, हम long short नहीं कर रहे. So I'm not searching for bad situations to short, right? I am always looking for opportunities to make money for my investors. So in some ways, I can't really give you examples too many of bad managements. There are some obvious ones in the past that are in public domain where there have been frauds, those kind of things. But that's a separate debate. I mean, those are bad managements where you kind of come to know in hindsight. It's not कि पहले से ही पता था, right? I mean, when it's a fraud, you unfortunately discover too late. But to my mind, it's just a question of, I think, our focus on where do we find good management rather than trying very hard to find bad management. Bad management is if somebody just eventually is not able to convince you that they have execution power. Sometimes even I would say not either good or bad, but stability of management. Right. So sometimes you find that companies that have a very nice correlation between what value they are creating for shareholders and with key employees as well. I mean, some of our largest banks are key examples of that, right? I mean, they have had the benefit of senior people staying with them for 15, 20 years, building institutions from banks, right? But that's because there was a perfect correlation of good management, right incentive to that good management to continue to be good. You reward that management in not just salary terms, but you make them part owners. So sometimes managements that are part to think about employment as entrepreneurship rather than employment. So it's a bit of all of that. I mean, I unfortunately there is no, and maybe I'm purposely doing this, Kushal, to you because I want your viewers to still say कि ठीक है, since there is no magic formula, मैं mutual fund ही ले लूंगा. But that's the reality. Ultimately, equity investing is a science and an art. If it was a science by now, I think some AI tool would have discovered how to generate returns from a portfolio more than any fund manager would, but that's not happened and perhaps will never happen, right? So for me, management is more a perspective of vision, mission, execution ability to think forward, ability to be straight and honest and transparent. Those are the factors.
What do you think about the current Indian markets? Do you think they're overvalued and do you expect a correction in the near term?
So Kushal, actually on Friday I did a session for a bunch of mutual fund distributors and we were discussing this only. And I realized, problem kya hai ki when you present a view on markets, you typically get assigned 40-45 minutes. So you come up with 22 slides. And they come up with many pros and cons of this market and what you should do. I have this joke I tell people कि हम mutual fund end last मतलब 20 slide के बाद we say one standard statement कि in the long term we remain positive, in the short term there could be volatility. The 22 slides may change, but the end statement does not change, right? And my argument is to some degree it is true. The way I think about it is very simple. It is today you're talking about a 3.7, $3.8 trillion economy, India. There is reasonable confidence that we are today on a trajectory that economy will grow at 6.5-7% over the next 5-7 years. We are probably in a nation where inflation, whatever our central bank, it has very valiant efforts, etc., will be 3-4%. So economy nominal terms will grow at 10%. You have to believe as a private sector company or a company at large will be slightly more efficient than 10% of the macro. So there will be some companies that will grow 12-13%. That's one typical finance guy's answer. Finance stroke non-finance answer is, to my mind, there are only two countries in the world where there is a beautiful correlation between economic growth and market cap. One such country is called the United States of America. Second country is India. You can go back 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, 25-year rolling, 30-year rolling. These are two countries where there's a massive correlation. So I come back to your question. So if I'm reasonably convinced that the economy will double in the next 5 years, if I've got so much evidence that our market cap of our markets and economy pretty much meet each other at some point, plus or minus 1 year, it means you're telling me that I have a chance to double my money in the next 4, 5, 6 years. I would say that's a fair argument. Abhi, now you ask me, but what will be the journey in between? My answer would be, since we are in Mumbai, think of a classical 90% of the storyline of a Bollywood movie. Normally movies start positively and we know all movies end positively. Beach mein, in order to cover 2.5 hours, there are twists and turns. So hamara bhi Bollywood movie hai. We've had 5-6 years of positive markets. Hamara happy start hai. मेरे हिसाब से $7 trillion इकोनॉमी, तो therefore $7.5 trillion, $8 trillion market cap, money will double, happy ending. You should be willing to see when you go to a movie theater. जब अगर ट्विस्ट एंड टर्न है, आपको पसंद नहीं है, आप थोड़ी उठ के जाते हैं, आप रुकते हैं ना एंडिंग के लिए. So my answer to most people when they ask questions about markets is that why do we wait for 22 slides to be discussed? To my mind, is down to one slide, the first slide, which is that if our economy is going to double in the next 4 to 5 years, we have had enough evidence that our markets will reflect that. If somebody believes that doubling money in 4 to 5 years is not good enough, then I would say that I am not the person to discuss what happens next, right? Because probably the person shouldn't be investing in markets. They should be probably hoping that Diwali comes every day so that they can play Teen Patti. I mean, because that's the only way I can think somebody believes कि boss पैसा double हो जाएगा एक हफ्ते में या 2 हफ्ते में or whatever. So that's basically my simple framework. That as long as, and that's the challenge with most retail investors, na Kushal. We've been brought up on equity, and I think somewhere even naturally, even I am used to it. I think maybe, I don't know whether you think, see, in equity, we always think in terms of when you buy something, hopefully it will double. Hopefully it will go up 3 times. When I tell you ki I think this will go up by 13.3% CAGR, you will be like, oh, it's not great.
6 साल में डबल हो रहा है.
हाँ, but I'm like 5-6 years, not a bad thing, no? I mean, look at some of the classical mutual funds that have been around for 20-25 years. I'm fortunate to have one of them as my investment. Unfortunately, I didn't invest a lot. I didn't earn a lot then. But I mean, if I start measuring it by मैंने कितना invest किया था and how much it is worth, it's a crazy, mind-boggling number. Perhaps better than my best investment I described. But unfortunately, in mutual fund, we always describe it as 13.4% CAGR over 20 years. But 13.4% CAGR over 20 years is a crazy number. So that's my simple answer, that I don't get into discussion ki next 1-2 years, 3 years में क्या होगा, because I don't know, and the reality is किसी को भी पता नहीं है. But as long as you have a cider कि boss movie का ending ठीक है, then enjoy the movie while it is, and that ability to enjoy is not easy.
एंड इसमें अभी जो म्यूचुअल फंड्स में इन्वेस्ट करते हैं, अभी काफ़ी सारे लोग हैं जो इक्विटी इन्वेस्टिंग से मूव होके म्यूचुअल फंड्स में जा रहे हैं. आई एम ऑल्सो वन ऑफ दोज एग्जाम्पल्स वेयर आई हैव मूव फ्रॉम इक्विटी इन्वेस्टिंग टू म्यूचुअल फंड इन्वेस्टिंग. सो लाइक इसमें मेरे को ये डिस्कस करना है कि फॉर मोस्ट पीपल हु आर वाचिंग दिस, जो यंग रिटेल इन्वेस्टर्स है, वो अभी लेट्स से 22-23 ईयर ओल्ड है एंड दे हैव जस्ट स्टार्टेड देयर फर्स्ट जॉब, सेकंड जॉब एटसेट्रा, फर्स्ट जॉब ओनली विद अ सैलरी ऑफ अज्यूमिंग 6 lakhs per annum, 50,000 per month. तो अभी आप उनको क्या रेकमेंड करोगे कि कितने टाइप के फंड्स में इन्वेस्ट करना चाहिए एंड कैसे आइडेंटिफाई करना है कौन सा फंड उनके लिए बना हुआ है?
So my answers on this one are always very boring, because my standard dialogue is actually making wealth from equities is actually, it's not some exciting subject. It's actually boring stuff that makes sense. So I would tell all the younger people, the first thing that they have in their advantage, and so do you, Kushal, which I don't have anymore, and I actually also did not use when you were young. लोग बोलते हैं ना कि प्लीज प्रैक्टिस व्हाट यू प्रीच. मैंने खुद कभी प्रैक्टिस नहीं किया. आई विश आई हैड. द बिगेस्ट advantage young people in India have is that they have the ability to start investing early. That firstly will outweigh anything else. मतलब आप किसमें इन्वेस्ट करोगे, आप कितना अमाउंट इन्वेस्ट करोगे obviously matters, but the fact that you start an investing journey when you're in your 20s, I think will materially alter your life. Point number 1. Point number 2, I think opportunity in India is so amazing in a sense that you will, chances are कि आप खुद का लाइफ को कॉम्प्लिकेट करोगे कि अभी किस टाइप ऑफ फंड में डालना चाहिए. आई हैव अ वेरी सिंपल फॉर्मूला. Firstly, no need to think about investing in across more than 6 or 7 or 8 mutual fund companies, mutual fund houses. There are 48 of us. Maybe in another 1 year, there'll be 55 of us. There are 60 of us. I believe greatly in the quality of our industry. all of us will do all right. So you can just pick 6 or 7 to make your life easier, right? Within that, a typical mix of flexi cap, multi cap, and multi asset. ये तीनों में कर लीजिए, which means, and I am not arguing कि 3 into 7, so 21 funds. I would say pick 1 or 2 from each of the 7 that you like. So a total portfolio of 12 to 15 funds, which should all tick the box of flexi, multi, and multi asset. Just keep investing in this regularly. I can guarantee you such a person will remember this podcast 15 years down the line with a lot of pleasure. Now, this is boring, practical reality. I also am very clear. I do not give advice that I do not follow myself. This is what I follow. I referred to earlier in our conversation. मेरा एक छोटा सा twist है. Till about 3 years ago, and I've been in this industry 30 years, so it's a long time. Till about 3 years ago, I never invested in any fund that I was not working in at that point in time. Now you can say that, wow, that is great faith. I would say that is not great faith. It's a reflection of how disorganized I am. तो मेरा कॉन्फिडेंस ये था कि भाई अगर मुझे इन्वेस्ट करना है तो बगल वाला कस्टमर सर्विस डेस्क है, मैं दे दूंगा एप्लीकेशन फॉर्म, मुझे रिडीम करना है तो यहाँ है. So, it's just coincidental that I've been really fortunate to work with some outstanding fund managers, so I've never had to pay the price for that. And over time, given that I've had to change, or I've changed jobs 4-5 times, so 4-5 mutual funds ho gaya, because I don't end up redeeming because I left the company kind of thing. But in the last 3 years, maybe I've started to diversify, but I stay to this 3 type of funds. But see, problem is that you also need excitement. बिकॉज आपको दोस्त के साथ शाम को आप बैठोगे, आप क्या कर रहे हो, मैंने ये स्टॉक ले लिया, बढ़ गया बॉस 5 टाइम. Suddenly that person is the hero of the conversation. And this person says, I have listened to Anthony, Heredia and Kushal. उन लोग ने कहा नहीं नहीं ये सब मत कीजिए, मेरे पास फ्लेक्सी कैप, मल्टी कैप और मल्टी एसेट. अरे यार भाई क्या कर रहे हो. तो आई ऑलवेज टेल यंग पीपल टुडे that you should do this advice I have given you for 80% to 90% of your portfolio. The rest of the 10%, I would say, have fun. So there is no advice. Matlab, if you are falling prey to some thematic fund somebody has launched and आपको जमता है तो आप कर लीजिए. I can only add that eventually once you become 35 or 40, you will realize that that was a waste of time. But since you need excitement, I must recommend excitement. One more advice I will give, especially your younger viewers. Especially if you start early, please also make the effort at some point after 5-7 years to take some of the money out and do something that makes you happy. Because I think one of the mistakes people in our profession do is that we only explain to people how to invest. I like to take a slightly different tack. How can I make your life nicer? Which means as a mutual fund provider, I should not just be the person who takes your money. There's also a role. I should give you money when you want to do something that you will come back with a smile on your face, right? And which is why I introduced the concept of multi-asset. Because multi-asset mein kya hai ki maybe it will not give the right kind of equity returns that people at the young 25-year-olds would want. But it is कि 5 साल के बाद दोस्त बोलते हैं कि चलो लेट्स गो टू जॉर्जिया और वियतनाम का ट्रिप करते हैं. It could be that you got equity investments that this is not really the right time to do. But so multi-asset gives you the ability to draw down at times and so on and so forth, right? So this is my magic formula, which includes redemption. Because I think any advice that only talks about investing is a one-sided thing. The advantage of starting early and keeping it to these very simple things is that by the time you hit not my age, but my age minus 10, you will not need advice because you will be hopefully reasonably wealthy enough to do whatever you want at any point in time. And you can take any other, as an industry, we are a consumer industry. So we have to keep creating new things that seem like they are very good. But I often tell people कि ठीक है, you know, I meet investors, बोलते नहीं नहीं सर, मैंने डिफेंस फंड ले लिया, मैंने मैन्युफैक्चरिंग फंड लिया, मैंने टूरिज्म फंड भी लिया, मैंने फाइनेंशियल सर्विसेज फंड भी लिया, हेल्थ केयर फंड भी लिया. तो मैंने बोला कि भाई मेरा फ्लेक्सी कैप फंड में ये 5 सेक्टर अकाउंट 75% ऑफ द पोर्टफोलियो. So unless you have decided to become a flexi cap fund manager and not an investor, I'm not sure what you're doing. Right? And he's like, oh, acha, mujhe to, I didn't realize it. And that's my simple angle कि there are fund managers out there who for, let's say, depending for 1.5% are willing to make all these life choices. तो आपको क्यों करना है? आप तो you focus on what you have to do.
So इसमें आप बता रहे हो कि a retail investor should not invest in more than 3 types of funds. One is flexi cap, one is multi cap, one is multi asset.
I will twist the answer. A retail investor will actually add no value to themselves if they invest in any funds beyond this.
Okay.
Even if they think they are.
Fair. Just for simpler usage or simpler understanding, एक बार just एकदम simple way में explain कर सकते हो what's the difference between flexi cap, multi cap, multi asset for people who don't know the meaning of these funds.
So flexi cap is, by just pure definition, it's a fund that can invest in large cap companies, mid cap companies, small cap companies. The fund manager has full, I would say, freedom to decide कि as of today, large cap में 50% है, small cap में 20% है, mid cap में 30%. 3 months later, because of the kind of stock opportunities they have, sector opportunities, call it whatever, it may turn out कि 70% is in small and mid cap. So complete flexibility है. Just bear in mind, the larger the flexi cap fund, the less you will see the flexibility being demonstrated. Because somewhere I have to think about liquidity, right? Because if I want to run a 20,000 crore fund, I can't just go arbitrarily and put 5%, 6% in 10 small cap companies. There is a liquidity risk to it, right? So that is, but for a moment, think of flexi cap fund as the fund manager has absolutely full discretion. Multi-cap has the same formula, but it puts a bit of a discipline, saying, dear fund manager, past experience suggests that you sometimes get this wrong. And I believe the long-term potential of India is in its small and mid companies. So I want to insist that minimum 25% in small cap at any point in time, minimum 25 in mid cap, and minimum 25 in large cap. The balance 25, you do what you want to do. So in some ways, it's a more disciplined format of a flexi cap fund. So it's not very different from a flexi cap fund, but it's a bit of a slightly different flavor. Multi-asset, Kushal, I think is for those who, lot of the 23 years old, 25-year-olds, but I would argue even 45-year-olds are starting to come to a very wrong conclusion that equity only goes one way. And I have a favorite dialogue that every staircase ka stair that is used to go up also comes down. Unfortunately, we are getting used to the habit that staircase only goes one way, right? I think it is important at any point in time to bring some kind of risk element to your portfolio. Multi-asset does 2-3 things. One is multi-asset does more often than not equity, but with some thought process about where that equity from a valuation perspective is to other broad asset classes. So there are 3 asset classes most multi-assets use: equity, debt, and a combination of gold and silver. So which means at any point in time, most multi-asset funds will have between, I would say, 50 to 70% in equity, but equally will have between 20 to 40% in a combination of gold, silver, and debt. Given that asset classes don't always move in the same direction over time, over years, it will mean a much less volatile journey to inflation beating returns than a typical equity product. It also means, for the fact that you have less volatility of risk, the potential upside is also lesser. So think about it as equity fund over 5 years minus 2%, but I would argue at probably 30 to 40% better sleep. I actually always describe risk as sleep. Now, when you put your head on the pillow, if you've had these 3 funds, chances are you will sleep pretty much in line with आपका typical sleeping pattern. The moment you have, X number of direct equity stocks, Y number of thematic funds, and you get some news over the, as of course, in a lighter vein, nowadays we are getting used to getting up in the morning to news. But otherwise, anything that doesn't allow you to peacefully sleep, no, to me is a reflection of risk that you have taken in a portfolio that you shouldn't be taking. And conversely, मेरा example ये है कि अगर आप multi cap, flexi cap and multi asset है, they will interplay amongst each other to make sure that at least you'll sleep okay.
You recommend equal balancing in all these three, like 33, 33, 33%?
I would say so, because automatically, there's an age-old formula. There are Nobel Prize winners also who have won prizes on the basis of their asset allocation models. But I have found that at least in our Indian markets, we have the good fortune. We have this archaic method we use, कि take your notional age as 100 minus your actual age. उतना पैसा typically equity में जाना चाहिए. The only recommendation I give to people today is that please keep some money for, to some degree, term if you feel like it, but health insurance. Sounds strange for a mutual fund guy to come here on a podcast and advocate maybe health insurance people should give me some ambassador money, but I genuinely believe that the way healthcare costs are going up, for a young person, sometimes that could derail your financial journey in a very significant way. Because आप कर रहे हो SIP 5,000, 10,000, all of that, and then something happens either to you or in the family, and it requires you to put down 5-10 lakhs. You may discover, if you've not got the right health insurance cover, that boss, you're back to square one. So jitna gyan humne de diya ki start when you're 22, you've effectively gone back to starting when you're 30.
Right.
So, so that's where I also bring in the multi-asset. Equity is not just, it's like very simple argument. Okay, if over 5-10 years, equity is always the asset class that gives highest return, why should I buy anything else? That is true, but the point is the 1 year which will one day come where equity is by far not the best performing asset class. How will you sleep in that 1 year? Is the question. If you believe you will be able to sleep, then by all means don't ever buy anything else. But since such human beings are not invented as yet, I therefore introduce that element of 1/3 of multi-asset to give that peace of mind. And I'm adding. So to my mind, 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 plus health insurance.
Got it. What's the AUM that you currently manage at Mahindra, Manulife AMC?
So roughly, Kushal, it's about 32,000 crores now. We're a relatively young firm, plus another $300-400 million that we advise overseas clients.
Okay.
Yeah.
So 32,000 crores plus
another, you could call 4,000-5,000 crores. Yeah.
Got it. And which has been like the best performing fund, and what's the return that it has given in your company?
So I think if I think about, first of all, I think it's always important to then talk about the funds that have had longer tenures. We are a relatively young company. Our multi-cap fund, our mid-cap fund, our focus fund, they all have 3 to 5 year track records. They've all beaten their benchmarks. Right now the returns look very good, Kushal, which is why I'm a little reluctant to talk about it, because like I said, 5 years right now, which means we're describing just of 2020. So the base COVID time, it looks like 18% CAGR, which I don't think is repeatable, right? So I would say, one thing we are very proud about in the business we have built is actually we don't have any star fund. We've done pretty decently in all of our funds. The way, in fact, we describe ourselves as a fund house to investors and to our distribution partners is we are the student who finished in the top half in every semester exam, such that when you finally graduated from primary school, you were the person who was in the top half every time. So over 5 years, you turn out to be the person who's in the top 10. That's the way we operate.
Why do you say that people should not invest in thematic new fund offers?
Because I just believe that if you look at the history, a lot of them come through when the theme has already started to play out. And to that extent, and I contrast it, right? I mean, I look at thematic funds that are launched in sectors or themes that are absolutely beaten down. Worst performing theme or sector in last 1 year. I look at the NFO collection, nobody's willing to invest. And I look at thematic funds of themes which have been the best performing theme of last 1 year, 2 years. They are typically products that do not deliver. That's one side of looking at it. In fact, on my LinkedIn, we did a fund launch 4-5 months ago. It was a big struggle. Okay. It was a value fund. It's not really a thematic fund, it's a diversified one, but it was a time when people were saying, boss, value is now out of fashion. And we were very clear, we want to create a value product because Krishna, who manages our overall franchise, is one of the better value investors in the industry. And I remember putting this on my LinkedIn. I am convinced this NFO is going to do well for investors because of how difficult it is to get money. It's almost like there's a correlation. जिस NFO में people are reluctant to invest, you go 3-5 years later, उसमें पैसा बनता है. And which NFOs are the absolute talk of the town, flavor of the moment, it's difficult to see people. And this is not, I'm giving you a Kushal example of last 2-3 years. You can go back 20 years. You go back to 2007, remember the infra funds that got done. Go back to 99, you remember the tech funds that got done. Right? So which is why I always believe that thematic funds, you end up investing in them pretty much 1/3 or 2/3 of the way. That's number. Number two, if I was to do one, you should ask me that if that is the case, you run a flexi cap fund. Should you not, because you are responsible to managing my money well, should you not have put more money in that theme or that sector? Because that's what you're paid to do, right? So that's how it may sound like a very purist way of thinking, but that's my belief. I had done one weird experiment when I try to explain to people the fallacy of this, na Kushal. And this is not completely accurate, but this is mostly. I tell people 10 years ago, you can just open typically websites that do display like value research would give you a fund category wise median return, average return, right? So you go back and now most categories have got a 10-year return. Large cap, mid cap, large and mid cap, flexi cap, etc. And I just tell people, just go back 10 years from now, before, and say that, I have no opportunity to listen to this podcast that Anthony and Kushal did. I have no advisor. I actually have no financial background. So with the lack of all of that, what can I do? But I want to invest. That only one concept I have learned, that I should invest. So if I don't do anything and I know nothing, what will I do? I will invest equally in every fund that exists at that time. Because I don't know to decide which fund house is better than the other. I do not know how one category is better than the other. Even in the category, I don't know which fund is better. So I put 1,000 rupees in every single equity fund that existed 10 years ago. I am guaranteeing you check the 10-year return of that result, which is nothing, simply put, I will take the average of all 11 categories that have 10-year records. Trust me, Kushal, you will end up with the 5th or the 4th best return.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Which then just goes to show that, boss, all this overthinking on which fund type, thematic, waste of time. There is only one, according to me, मेरे 30 साल में मैंने एक ही चीज सीखा है. And maybe I have only, unfortunately for my own personal wealth status, learnt it in the last 3-4 years only. एक ही चीज है जो पैसा बनाता है मार्केट में, भले आप डायरेक्ट इक्विटी हो लेते हो या म्यूचुअल फंड, देयर इज ओनली वन मैजिक फॉर्मूला, and that is it is called samay. That is the reality. If you are able to give 10 years, 15 years to any investment, it doesn't matter. Then even the thematic fund you bought at the peak will have made money for you, argument's sake. So I'm like, boss, why do you want to go there? Just buy any diversified fund. I sometimes tell people, मेरा सब फंड को एक डार्ट बोर्ड पे ले लो, आप here's the dart, throw it, whatever it hits on, just invest in it, doesn't matter, as long as you will come back only after 10 years. But if you're the kind of person who will throw the dart, then after 2 months you'll come and say, अच्छा आपने वो किया, now it is down 3%, So I'll remove it. I'll put it in the fund which is up 5%. That effectively is very, very, there are lots of statistics that show that if you miss the best month in the market over the last 20 years, you will make 90% less return. 90%.
Oh my God.
Right? So imagine you are invested for 18 years out of 20 years. So you could argue, I would say, कुशल मैं लॉन्ग टर्म इन्वेस्टर हूँ, लास्ट 20 साल में 18 years में इन्वेस्टेड रहा हूँ. But if you happen to be someone who unfortunately believes you have a high IQ, so आपको पता है कि बॉस मार्केट का ये महीने में मंदी होने वाला, so I'll take out my money and it turns out to be the opposite, you will make 10% of the original return. And I've seen these statistics. If you Google it, you'll find this is not statistics of Indian market. अब US में भी ये studies दिखाएगा. So which basically goes back to telling me that, boss, it is not for any, whether it is a young person, old person, middle-aged person, man, woman, listening to this podcast. Actually, only one thing makes money, which is time. Not thematic fund, not diversified fund, not anything.
आपने एक बार अभी रिसेंटली बताया था इंटरव्यू में दैट जेनजी पार्टिसिपेशन हैज आल्सो बीन इंक्रीजिंग अ लॉट इन म्यूचुअल फंड्स. तो कितने टाइम्स ग्रो हुआ है वो जेनजी पार्टिसिपेशन एंड हाउ आर यू लाइक लुकिंग एट दिस एंटायर न्यू जेनजी audience coming into the mutual fund investing?
So I'll put it this way. I think from what I've seen in terms of data, people, Gen Z have been coming into the market all slightly more than overall. So for example, if the industry has added maybe 1 crore unique, so industry has probably grown from 4.5 crore investors to 5.5 crores. The percentage of Gen Zs in 4.5 crores is not materially different from percentage of Gen Zs in 5.5 crores. So first point I would make is there is a bit of a belief, I would not say in our industry, but there's a belief that Gen Z is not much into investing. They are into experiences. They are into spending. They are into kharcha. I think that data is very wrong. There is enough Gen Zs that we obviously seem to see from data who are investing. That's point number one. What can we do to get it to the next level? I think is to engage with them through ways and means which are different from traditional. So I'll give you a simple example. Something that we've started to do is we've started to actually use marketing spends on platforms that typically Gen Z uses. So the argument is that classical thinking would have been, chalo, I'll do on the financial newspapers, I will do it in the financial websites, etc. I'm not sure Gen Z is going to those places to consume content, right? So, but Gen Z is obviously going to order stuff on the online grocery portals and so on and so forth. So, find a way to engage with them at that point. The second reality I've discovered is that Gen Z is consuming information and deciding which investment is good, which fund is good, in ways and means that we are unable to figure out. So we, for example, for the last 1.5 years, I can tell you at our fund house have been measuring something called share of voice, which is across any platform, social, mainstream, whatever. How is our brand? How is our fund? How much share of voice are we getting? And I'm almost seeing a direct correlation between an increase in share of voice and an increase in Gen Z participation. Because if I move beyond the thought process ki mainstream media is the only way to educate, inform, and I move to thinking that any platform that Gen Z uses to keep themselves informed or entertained, if I make myself available, it's a far superior way to get them into the kitty. There's a lot of work to be done in that regard. I don't want to pretend here to say that, oh, actually, surprisingly, Gen Z बहुत invest कर रहे हैं. वो नहीं, that's still a time frame. The second slightly different thing I would talk about is, I think Gen Z looks for a hook. I think SIP is that hook. So I think the way SIP has got accepted, and it also talks to what Gen Z, you go to a Gen Z and you start discussing how आपको 5 लाख रुपया invest करना है और 2 लाख invest करना है, or somebody whose first job or second job, he or she is earning 6 lakhs, 8 lakhs, 9 lakhs, 12 lakhs. You are almost alienating them, saying that you are discussing something that is not relevant to me. But you start discussing ki boss, start with a 10,000 buck SIP, 5,000 buck SIP. There's a lot of resonance. And I know AMFI is also spending kafi energy on this, because then you move beyond the typical traditional advertising in mainstream media with partnerships with, the large platform players, do a lot of ground level activation. Biggest thing that I think, Kushal, jo missing hai na, which I don't know how we can fix, is the education or finance literacy in late, I would say, secondary schools and colleges. If we are able to find solutions for that, I think that will do far more for Gen Z than anything else. Like I was just discussing before we started this podcast. I mean, yesterday, I spent an hour and a half on a Sunday morning, and this is something I just do as a way of giving back, right? I just addressed a bunch of 16, 18-year-olds for an hour and a half on investing. I didn't discuss कौन सा फंड डिवर्सिफाइड. मैंने उनको सिखाया कि बॉस इन्फ्लेशन क्या चीज होता है, हाउ इट विल चेंज योर लाइफ ओवर द नेक्स्ट 15-20 years. I taught them कि बॉस कंपाउंडिंग क्या होता है. How I teach them, कुशल, not by financial ज्ञान. मैं सिर्फ एक पिक्चर डालता हूँ. I show them 25 पैसे का कॉइन, 5 पैसे का कॉइन, 10 पैसे का. मैंने कहा जब मैं आपका एज था ना, मैंने ये कॉइन देखा है, right? And next is shows 2 rupee note, 1 rupee note, 5 rupees. मैं बोला some of you may have seen this note, and I just tell them, boss, 15 years, 10 years from now, maybe we will not see 100 rupee note in circulation. And the only way you counter that is by investing in stuff that is able to compound, right? I mean, these are the ways you teach these people. And then the final, which we have discussed in this podcast, I tell them, boss, आपका सबसे important advantage is somebody has taken the time to tell you this today. When I was 18, किसी ने मेरे को कहा नहीं था. Fortunately for me, I learnt it at home because my dad used to do it, but so many people don't. So मेरे हिसाब से the big magic pill for Gen Z is if we are able to teach people in college these concepts. Or hopefully, I would say, Kushal, even if you think about your usual audience, why should it be people who are 22, 23, 25? Why is it not 17, 18-year-olds? And I'm hoping over time people will also, I mean, I think it already must be happening, but I think for the industry or for all of us, the more 18-year-olds watch your podcasts, the more Gen Z will invest.
In one of your talks, you also addressed about the misinformation spread by Finfluencers on social media. What's your take on that and the entire Finfluencer economy going out there?
I would just put it this way. There is a massive role Finfluencers play, right?
Is there a definition of influencer?
No, there isn't really, because I mean, this is a very controversial, I can't answer. I can't get the right answer in front of somebody who's one of the biggest influencers out there.
No.
But let me put it this way. Someone who is looking to create content around various subjects related to personal finance, investments, and life, by and large, will more often than not be doing a good deed. Someone who takes the next step and starts saying that I know how to make money quick from FNO, equities, so on and so forth, I think more often than not, you find some loopholes and holes in that space. That's where I come from. And like I said, I mean, like I described, the magic formula to making money for yourself in the long term is buy some basic funds, invest, and give it time. And there's so much of content that you and some of the others produce. I mean, think of it this way. Even I have personally, forget Gen Z, because I listen to a lot of podcasts. I have learned how to use credit cards more efficiently because of influencers. It never struck me. For me, typical 50-year-old man, credit card only meant a convenient thing to use. But now you start thinking ki and you can call this a very miserly attitude. I will use a credit card जिसका joining fee 0 है और annual fee 0 है. That's the standard मतलब template मेरे लिए. But अभी मैं सोच रहा हूँ बॉस, जिससे मैं 5,000 या 10,000 का annual fee है, there are lots of advantages to it because there are some places I go to eat. There's a card on Easy Diner. There's a etc. etc. The concept of, how to say, education. Today, so many young people think about education, overseas education, visas. There's a wide variety of topics. If I just look at something like what influencers that are tackling simple topics that I think that's the only place I will say people think Finfluencers or influencers are doing this and there are good people for the young generation. My answer is no. It is actually good content for a lot of Indians who are in their 30s and 40s as well, who actually don't look at, think about the entire learning people will have on loans, right? Because today, with the technology and access to information, there are so many people showing up. One of the biggest places, and in fact, I would probably encourage you, Kushal, if you could do this, because according to me, this is going to be a massive thing to learn. Understand how to keep yourself secure in the digital age. Because when you start hearing some of the stuff that is happening, right? So it's not, you may learn how to invest, you may learn how to get the right card, you can learn how to take the best loan, but you haven't learned to keep yourself digitally secure, it can just get wiped out. So I'm saying, who can do that? I think it's an influencer that can play that role, because you're not going to have cybersecurity firms starting to do educational programs, right?
So what was the misinformation which was spread when you addressed the topic?
I posted this on LinkedIn a couple of, like for example, when the markets and I could claim that I'm being proven right. So जब market गिरी थी ना, this is between October and March.
October 24.
October 24 to March 25, and then just after that, so many people were starting to post. I saw on LinkedIn percentage fall from 52-week highs of mutual funds, and my point was that this is misinformation. At least you should have the same starting point. No, everybody's 52-week high must have been at a different point. First of all, the guy reached a 52-week high. तो पहले तो आप हाई बनाओ ना, उसके बाद बात करो. And there were people even from my own ecosystem who kept peddling that, and they peddled in such a way that obviously they looked good. And I'm like, what are we trying to do? We should be actually using these platforms to give confidence to people ki boss, don't worry, things will work out in the long term. But instead, we are taking pot shots at all over 52-week. What does 52-week, the 52-week high in a equity? Maybe there is a context every day in some of the pink papers. You have companies that hit 52-week high and 52-week low. Sometimes that tells you a story, right? Because it means a company is somewhere doing well and market is recognized. But how can a portfolio of 50 stocks fall from 52-week high mean anything, especially when date of that for me maybe August 24, for somebody else it is September 24. Markets itself have gone up 6% between them. So it is stuff like that. It is stuff like people, and I've seen this personally, where sometimes the drive is more selling training program and training content and the fees for that. And somehow people are very selective about how they publish their own success stories. And you marry that with the reality that the regulator puts out that 90% of people lose money, right? And so you want stuff like that to be controlled. But there's a lot of good stuff that happens around, like I said, I'm not saying this because I'm here. You look at the one you just did. I happen to see it on the way, right? The concept of ACA versus ACCA versus CA versus CFA. That is practical dilemmas that somebody in their 20s will have. And it's useful to have a perspective on it, right? So it's my misinformation and let me clarify. It was not towards Finfluencers. It is misinformation by anybody.
Right. I agree with you on the quick money part, FNO part, and there are so many examples. Recently, there was a person, she was fined by SEBI when she was selling courses about FNO and she was guaranteeing that आप इतना पैसे बना लोगे. She made 107 crores by selling courses and had to pay a fine of I think half the amount.
Yeah.
And there have been like a lot of people who've sold a lot of courses and guaranteed returns through their courses, which is of course not something that is allowed, and it's not even like legal. You can't guarantee returns anywhere.
Correct.
So I think those are the people, or maybe those are the kind of influencers which have been categorized in a negative way, and because of them what has happened is that the honest creators, or the creators who have been creating very value additive content, just giving out knowledge and information without selling anything, उनके भी इस पे ऐसे थोड़ा ये लग गया है कि अरे ये तो इन्फ्लुएंसर है तो ये तो कुछ ना कुछ बेचेगा ही ultimately towards the end. So it's very important for the audience to understand a good quality content creator versus like someone who's just trying to sell something and guaranteeing returns.
Kushal, that's what I'm telling you, no? I am saying on public record, I've learned how to use a credit card better because of content I observed. We were discussing it before your show. Because of my office location and my residence location, I am a massive listener to podcasts, and this wonderful content that you can actually pick up from a variety of podcasts. And I listen. I mean, to be fair, I mean, you may find this very. I am very fond. I'm a foodie. So I listen to a lot of food-based podcasters.
Wow,
there are guys who interview a lot of food founders, and I am fascinated listening to their stories. I have listened to the entire series of Shark Tank 4 on my way to work and back from work in the car. So I've not seen it. I've heard it, because to me, you listen to these stories of so many amazing entrepreneurs trying to make it. There are relevancies for your business. So a similar way, whether it is on LinkedIn, whether it is to some degree on Insta, but I think more often on YouTube, people who are creating content, I'm reiterating, on personal finance, I think massive value add.
Yeah. What's the average holding period you think people should have for investing in a mutual fund? मैंने invest कर दिया तो on an average में कितने साल के लिए hold करना
I would say at least 5 to 7 years if it is an equity linked fund, 3 to 5 years if it is multi-asset, if it is fixed income, maybe 2 to 3 years. That's broadly what I would say. Once you cross that threshold, then depending कि आपका life का कुछ important चीज आपको करना है, then you can make use of the money. Because we never talked about this, but I'll tell you one very strange statistic about me. I have never taken a loan in my life.
Oh.
Ever.
Why? Or what's the point of
I don't know. It's just somewhere I always kind of calculate ki there is part of my portfolio I would have to pay 8%, 10% interest. So that's as good as an investment for me. So if I'm paying somebody else 10%, if I don't take the loan and I use my money, that's effectively opportunity cost 10%. It's also probably a reflection of Mumbai real estate. I once bought, the one time I did not have money and I needed to take a loan, the project got delayed so much that by the time the installment came, I had money.
When you bought your house?
When I bought a house, yeah, right. So, I'm one of those fortunate people. I still live I now moved back. I still live in the same house I was born in.
Oh.
So maybe that's part of the reason I'm a Mumbaiker. So I have the benefit of not needing to buy an expensive apartment in Mumbai. So I'm not kind of propagating why take a loan and so on and so forth. We could have a whole different podcast on rent versus buy and so on and so forth. But if you think about it, today actually taking leverage, if it is sensible, is a smart thing to do.
So you'll advise people taking loan?
If they really need it. The thing I worry about is that loan giving has become such a beautifully tech-stroke marketing-driven activity as well, that to give you an example, and this is something again I picked up from I didn't pick this part, I always have done. I set my credit card payments to auto pay full amount on due date, right? So I don't want to push people saying, no, take leverage, use your card, because such people sometimes end up not having the money, or they over leverage themselves and they don't realize the kind of interest rates that they're then paying. But I'm saying that tomorrow, if it's a question of saying, I want to do this, it's really important, it may change my life, and the only way I can do that is by taking a loan, I would say by all means do it. As opposed to saying, no, don't ever take a loan, it will be harmful, kind of thing. But on the flip side, I just would say that, taking a loan, because today credit has become so easy. Taking an unsecured personal loan because people are willing to give it to you, that's what I would say young people should be very careful about. And it's not like I said, it's a completely different set of topics. Yeah. I'm not sure I'm the expert to discuss that, given that I just said that I learned better usage of credit cards from an influencer. So I should not मतलब मेक द मिस्टेक कि मैं एक बड़ा इन्फ्लुएंसर का पॉडकास्ट में मैं सिखाऊं कि आपको लोन कैसा करना चाहिए.
You said that you bought a house and you moved back to the original house. So you again sold that house?
Yes, I did. I sold that house.
Was it a bad financial decision of buying a house?
No, I didn't. It's just circumstantial. I bought a house because I came from a generation where buying a house was important. It kind of gave you a feeling that you don't want to rely on other people. So I bought a house. As it turned out, like I said, I had the bad fortune of buying a house in a project that got seriously delayed. So it got probably 10 years or 9 years for the project to come through. It turned out eventually to be a great financial decision. I think I sold it at a 10x.
What? Seriously?
Yeah. I mean, I sold
in how many years?
In about 14 years.
Okay.
14 15
years, 10x.
Yeah.
That's a good IRR.
No, it's. I'm guessing it's a very good IRR. Yeah. But I don't kind of use it to tell people how much of an expert I am on real estate, because I think it's pure luck. Right? It was a crowd decision. Many of my friends and colleagues were also buying in that place, so I also bought. If you think about where we are currently shooting, this whole area, Parel, Lower Parel, that you think about it, Kushal, 15 years ago, this was a very different space.
Right.
So if you took a bet on that and said, I'd buy an apartment in a gated community, you pretty much made 8x or 10x because of the way that has transformed, right?
But sir, like if I talk about this property specifically, यहाँ पे तो किसी ने पैसा नहीं बनाया है.
No, that is because I can guarantee you that if I think about it, and I didn't have a good fortune of having a property in this place, but if I think about when I sold the property, the only property I ever bought, actually I bought a second one in Goa, but that I'm Goan, so I will always keep that. I don't even think about that in financial terms. But I think I would have sold in 2018. I think at best, if I had sold it today versus 2018, I would have sold it for maybe 15% more than what I sold it for.
Exactly. Which is not a lot.
Yeah. And I sold it like the investment guy I am. Which I think counts for a lot. Like, which means that I did not sell it saying that this is my price if only when people pay. Anybody who made a price, I started to do an Excel sheet saying if I take this, I put this money in a deposit, I'll anyways in the next 1 month make the same return. So I remember when I put my apartment up for sale, there were probably 5 apartments of similar sizes available that were on the block for 3 to 6 months before that.
Where was this property?
This I don't want to name, but this was in Sivri.
Okay.
In one of the gated communities.
Okay.
I exited before all of them in 1 month flat.
Okay.
Because I was very clear, this is the ballpark. किसी ने मेरा ballpark पे 95-96% दे दिया. We had a conversation. I said, मैं 100 को मैं 98 कर दूंगा, आप 95 को 97 कर दूंगा. We'll meet somewhere in the middle. You have your dream house. I have my dream exit. Let's. So we did that. I mean,
best investment तो ये हो गया ना आपका फिर 10x in 14 years.
No, my best investment is actually when I was 20 years ago, I think 20 years, late 90s की बात है. I had invested, unfortunately at that time I did not have the money. I've invested in a equity fund like I said, I can't explain it to you in percentage terms. Only when, in the last 5-7 years, you start to get the NSDL cash, etc. Fortunately, back in those days, there was no real large concept of KYC, etc. In fact, I remember, it seems like, and this will show you how disorganized I am, कि मुझे याद है मैंने खुद का ऑफिस उस जमाने में, यू डिडंट पुट योर हाउस एड्रेस, मैंने मेरा ऑफिस का एड्रेस डाल दिया, मेरा फोन नंबर ऑफिस वाली डाल दी. So naturally, and I think it was some 20 or 30,000 rupees or something. So after 5-10 years, I genuinely have forgotten I've ever invested in this thing. In 2019, whenever this NSDL cash thing came, it showed, and I'm like, ye kya hai? Then it struck me ki, acha, I seem to have invested. I cannot tell you, Kushal, how complicated it was for me to get hold of details. Because they only PAN, fortunately, my PAN number was the same, right? But naturally, the person in the call center will be highly suspicious. Because person says, अच्छा सर आपका नाम एंथनी हेरेडिया है, एड्रेस बोलिए, मैं एड्रेस बोल दूंगा, बोला ये नहीं है, फिर मैं I'll take another guess. Then she's like, सर ये तो बिल्कुल नहीं है. Then she'll be number, मैं नंबर दूंगा. Fortunately, because I'm from the industry, I finally managed to convince them. So you think I still have that? I don't know what that is of. That is some crazy number.
कितना होगा?
So it must be up some 50 times, I think, I guess.
Wow.
Because just think about somebody who's invested in equity in the 90s in a equity fund that's done pretty well.
Yeah.
Like what is 18% CAGR in 25 years? I don't know what that number must be.
It is doubling every 4 years. So 6 times it is double. So 2 raised to 6. So कितना हो गया?
Pata nahi. See, but Kushal, I'll tell you, I am very clear. Even though I'm a finance investment guy, I don't calculate CAGRs. I don't calculate all this because I just believe whatever you invest in is effectively in only one direction. It is the pursuit of happiness. So whatever I have done as investment, has it from a financial perspective created a degree of happiness so that I can do what I want, I can do whatever I want for my family? The answer is yes.
Yeah.
Is that 10x? Is that 20x? I don't know. I don't care.
Right. What's the worst financial decision you've made in your life?
It is not to, like I said this, it is not to practice what I have preached.
No, but give me one decision which was very
No, it
bad.
is not. Like I said, I mean, if I had...
one financial mistake in your life.
I started my first SIP only about 7 years ago, which is saying quite something when I've been in this industry 30 years. So I would say you could argue it is the worst financial decision because if you think about it, had I started an SIP when I stood on a podium telling other people that why doing this is so important 25 years ago, I would be very differently off. I mean, people argue, in our industry, there was this bit of a challenge when जब SEBI ने skin in the game introduce किया. मैंने किसी को बोला अगर वो मेरे starting of career में किया होता ना, I perhaps would have retired from this industry 10 years ago.
I was talking to Miss Radhika Gupta of Edelweiss, and she said that the average holding period in India of a mutual fund holder is around 2 years, and we discussed that it should be average like at least 5-6 years, etc. So ये 2 साल का ही है, and if yes, like why are people so impatient about redeeming it in 2 years? क्या कर सकते हैं इसको better कैसे कर सकते हैं?
I think it will happen. We can also do education and all, but it will happen on its own, Kushal. See, the point is, what is the... I am of the camp that believes that we take Indian investor, we think they are not as savvy. But so when we think about 2 years, 2 years ago, the average holding was 1.5 years.
Oh, is it?
2.5 years ago, it was 1 year. So I think by the time we are speaking today, I don't know when you had this conversation with Radhika, but it's already probably 2.5 years. Which means that, say, I'll give you a different kind of example of that journey. 2007 की बात है, or let's say 2004 to 2007, the first big bull market we kind of saw in our industry. When markets would go up, people would invest like crazy. NFOs used to happen at 10 rupees, so people would think it's amazing. Agar market girti thi, so people would redeem. Okay. So much so, to give you classic example, suppose there were these infra funds that got launched, 10 rupiya pe, then obviously 2008 financial crisis happened. 2009-10, a lot of them 10 ka 7, 10 ka 6 ka NAV hua. When the NAV market started to go back, wo NAV 10 ho gaya, maximum redemptions happened. That was the typical psyche of investors then. So I'm guessing holding patterns, very small. Then we have moved to after 2014-18 kind of period where investors have reached a point where actually if market 2% girti hai, maximum amount of inflows happen on that day. Okay, where people believe, acha, meaning ऐसा नहीं है कि there are other people who don't redeem, but the people who are investing are far outnumbering. So I can give you an example that, let's say at the time of demonetization, when the markets fell, it just coincided with President Trump coming to power for the first time. Those are periods where maximum money came when markets fell. So that's the second evolution of the customer. I think we are now witnessing the third evolution, which will probably be the evolution which will expand timeframes the most. Now, whether market goes up 2% on a day or falls 2%, there is no material difference in flows. Which is the way it should be, right? Because agar aap long term ke liye invest kar rahe ho, one day should not change your mind. So I am deeply convinced ki over the next, let's say 3 to 5 years, what was a 2-year holding period will become a 3-year holding period, will become a 3.5. I don't think there is much to be done about that. In fact, आपको याद होगा about 7-8 महीने पहले there was quite a controversy around, small and mid caps are overvalued and stuff like that, and one should stop their SIP. And I had actually written an article which had a lot of views, and I said, boss, it's got nothing to do with start stop. If you are not willing to give a small and mid cap investment 8 to 10 years, there are chances that you will have grief. So if you ask me, will 2-year holding become 3 will become 3.5? The answer is I think it's going to happen. When will it become 7? That I don't unfortunately have a pill for, because that is what makes money. See, 2 साल को 2.5 साल, 2.5 साल को 3 साल में, no, honestly, Kushal, depending on what market environment it has been, it will be good for you or not. Challenge is, how do we convince people? Because it has taken me 30 years to learn that. No?
Yeah.
Somebody who's part of the ecosystem.
What's your view on index funds, and what do you advise young investors whether they should invest, and if yes, how to decide which index fund to invest in?
I would say keep it simple. There are so many types of index funds. Eventually, the same answer as thematic. If you buy all these kind of indexes, it will all eventually boil down to the return of the basic index. So equal weight, quality, momentum, factor, blah, blue, all put together. If you assume you bought 8 variants of Nifty 50, if you bought one Nifty 50, all the 8 variants ka average return will be Nifty 50. Kind of thing. That would be answer number 1. So don't complicate index investing. It's supposed to make your life simpler. Second is there going to be a room for index investors? By the way, just so that you know, we don't offer any index funds, right? We believe we are active funds. We will take fees and we will add value. But be that as it may, I believe that, I think for large caps, probably the way to go is index. I find it very difficult to argue for large active over large passive.
Meaning? I didn't get this.
Meaning that if you're going to predominantly invest in a large cap fund, the percentage of large cap funds run actively that will outperform a Nifty 50 or a Nifty 100 index product or a BSE 100 index product, it's going to be more and more challenging as time goes.
So you're saying that large cap mein index funds will have a higher chance of outperforming the active
I'm
fund
saying
managers.
that if you were an investor and you're investing some allocation into large caps, then pick an index fund or pick an active fund. It shouldn't really matter.
So कौन सा मतलब index fund large cap में मतलब क्या
So
example?
any index
Nifty
that is
50 types.
replicating the Nifty or the Nifty 100 or the BSE 100.
Okay.
I prefer to do 100, not the 50, because I think it's, you just think about it. The company in the small cap index that was, let's say, the largest small cap, right? If you look at the market cap of that today, it was probably almost a large cap 3-4 years ago by market cap, right? Because that's the way market caps have increased. So when I think the top 50 companies today are all gigantic, so it's probably better to look at a top 100 index, and there are enough of them available. But once you step beyond that, small cap, mid cap, etc., the way I would argue, and you may think this is a very controversial argument, index also means you're trusting some kind of a manager, because there is an index committee that is deciding which companies are good and should come in an index and which companies are bad and should exit. And given that market cap and price momentum end up being large parts of it, you are always slightly behind the curve, right? So any part that has small and mid caps, I would still believe in the next 5-7 years, there's enough appetite for active guys to prove that they deserve your money. I have another point. It's not controversial. This is a very what people do not to explain this, Kushal, is that they put up slides which say 60%, 80% of funds underperform the index, and they will show it against regular plans. Now, I'm saying, okay, you are explaining to somebody that since this happened, you should do it yourself and buy an index fund. So my answer is, if you can do it yourself, then you will do it yourself and buy a direct plan of a mutual fund, no active fund. And then do a comparison of direct plan of active funds. You will have a very materially different result. Because ultimately, you look at a lot of direct plans of mutual funds, they are selling at a 50% TER. A lot of the passive funds are doing it at 30. So if expense ratio is your big thing, then even an active fund. But I want to end this particular segment by saying it doesn't matter. Passive ho ya active. What only matters is Samay. And I know there's a very popular podcaster called Samay. I'm not plugging him, right? But that's the reality.
Yeah. Not a podcaster, but a stand-up comedian.
Yeah.
Do you watch his comedy content as well?
I do. In fact, I yesterday went to stand-up, very famous American stand-up comedian called Kevin Hart. Fabulous show.
Where was this?
This was at the Dome.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
He came here just for one show. Very famous American Hollywood star comes. No, like I said, Kushal, I was and since Gen Z is a large part, you do this because there is life. No?
Yeah.
So,
what's your personal asset allocation looking like, percentage wise?
Challenging question. I'll have to think. I think right now it must be about 50% equity, and the rest is probably some versions of fixed income stroke. So there's maybe 5% multi-asset, 50% equity, so 55. 45 is just there.
As in real estate?
No. It's in like liquid forms of
bank, FD.
No, arbitrage funds.
Achha, arbitrage funds.
Yeah. No, I'm a die-hard mutual fund guy. So it's all mostly arbitrage funds. Part of it is because, if permitted, one of the things I want to do, Kushal, if I can, is I want to think about getting into the angel
investing.
Not because I am fascinated with the amount of money you'll make, but I think it's one of the tools to keep yourself young, right? Because you work with these young entrepreneurs, you basically will learn so much. Which is why I told you I'm fascinated with podcasts, Shark Tank, because it's just amazing to see what the young generation is creating. So that's partly part of my mind. Second is, at some point, maybe from a real estate standpoint, buy something which is then materially more costly. So I've just kept it there. Otherwise, I'll then invest it in equity when the time. I mean, no particular reason why I'm only 50% in equity. Is it that I don't believe? No. It's just that I kept it there. I told you, Kushal, my calling card is I am disorganized and lazy, personally.
And you're so honest about it.
Yeah, so I still maintain that, sadly, at times. I mean, but I could argue, by the way, that it's not turned out bad, because in the last 1 year, it's probably provided a plus 7% tax efficient return. So markets are flat, so it hasn't cost me.
Yeah. What is an arbitrage fund, and do you invest? Do you recommend people who are watching this to invest in arbitrage funds?
If you have a material amount of money, because I sometimes think that you go and invest 50,000 in an arbitrage fund because the 6% return or 7% return is going to be taxed at 20 versus 30. It will work out to you're doing all of this activity to save 300 rupees. But if it is a larger sum of money, then compared to a liquid fund, compared to a savings bank account, it's definitely a superior opportunity, right? Because of the way it is, the taxation works, for sure. I think a lot of high net worth investors, a lot of medium net worth investors also have increasingly been doing that. But my simple advice would be also, इसको मेरा पहले एडवाइस को किस जैसे मत कीजिए. 7-8 आर्बिट्राज फंड, एक दो ठीक है, सब आर्बिट्राज फंड एक ही होता है.
Do you also think you're going to add, let's say, art as an unconventional asset in your portfolio?
I have. I didn't. Oh, sorry. I did not. I do not consider art as an investment.
Okay.
So I don't think about the art that my wife's also very passionate about art. So we have been buying art for pretty much the last 10 years. Not material amounts, but I would think, yeah, it's decent. But we don't see it as investment.
So it's just because you like it.
It's life. I'd like to see that art in my house. Somebody could argue that if this is my house, it's like an art gallery. Maybe it's not. But
how many art pieces you have?
I have no idea. But we are passionate about art. My wife is particularly I argue that my wife could have been a very successful interior designer.
What is she doing now?
She's a homemaker. She used to be she used to be in marketing, corporate market, FMCG marketing. She quit to take care of our kids, but she has a very artistic temperament. I don't. So anybody who visits my house and says, "Oh, this looks lovely," I cannot claim any credit. But only on art. I somehow I seem to have a lot of passion on art as well. So I'm on the speed dial of some of the art auction houses as well, because they will. But we're not. So, like I said, we don't think about it from an investment standpoint.
So you were the vice chairman of AMFI, right? So now, it's been recent only that you've stepped
because
down?
Typically over every 2 years there's a change.
Okay.
But I still am involved in the industry's ops and compliance risk committees. I mean, in a sense, it's a way of giving back, right, to the industry.
So when did you when you were the vice chairman of AMFI for 2 years, right?
Yeah. So basically 23 to 25. So September 23 to September 25.
Okay. So this month only.
Yeah,
like 2 weeks back.
Yeah.
Okay. So when there are a lot of scandals which happen in the mutual fund industry, how do you react to them? For example, the Access front running scandal in 2022, or the Templeton crisis which happened in 2020. What are some other scandals that have happened? And as you were the part of AMFI, being the vice chairman, how do you deal with it?
So Kushal, I'll react. It's not a scandal. I'm not trying to kind of brush it on the carpet saying ye hota hai. It's obviously both there, and they're two very different episodes, right?
Yeah.
I mean, in case of Templeton, it was a question of, and I don't want to speak for them beyond a point, but it got sorted out because eventually all the investors got their money back. There was an illiquidity situation. I think our industry in general in that context is one of the cleanest possible, right? I mean, there will always be sometimes an occasion where there is one bad individual, but I can assure anybody who's watching this podcast that the kind of controls processes are very solid. And I'll tell you one thing that people don't give enough credit for. Our regulator, on one hand, it kind of seems painful at times. But somewhere the confidence in the entire ecosystem is because of this regulator, right? So when you think about transparency, the checks, the balances, the controls, it's just because consistently the regulator over the last 15, 20 years has been at it. So I would probably draw from, in the mid 90s, there was a bit of a issue with an AMC called Credit Capital, I think it was. But since then, the regulator has been very, 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 very intent on ensuring investor protection first, business and industry growth next.
What had happened in 1990?
No, sir, I think there was, and that got solved. I think in the 90s, there was something about a lot of the investments were made with group companies or something of that sort. I don't exactly remember what it was, but the point is that I have at least seen that the regulator is very, very proactive. At times, you could argue harsh, but just to give you one example, and this is not a scandal at all, right? But there was a time when the regulator came up with this plan that we should have some money that has spent on investor education. So all of us had to put aside 2 basis points. This is 10 years ago. Then the regulator felt that perhaps is this money being spent in the right spirit? So they insisted that that 1 basis point, half of that needed to go to AMFI so that a group of individuals drawn from the industry would work together. Now you think about it, you would say that that is harsh. That is that is what created MFSI, because it is that campaign, that corpus that got this campaign created, which has created this whole SIP revolution in a sense, right? So my simple answer is that that is the one thing I have the most confidence on. Like, will you generate superior returns from investing in mutual funds over the next 10 years? I'm pretty confident. Will you be assured that this will be run in a transparent and good professional manner with the right controls? I am very confident.
What is one bet that you went contrarian on? Like सब लोग बोल रहे थे कि नहीं इसमें नहीं करना चाहिए, इसमें तो यहाँ पर पैसा बनेगा ही नहीं, some theme or something, but you were like नहीं इसमें पैसा बन सकता है in your entire career.
No, so I can give you one example, like as a fund house, but it's not a call I took. I can stand and take some, not credit, but I can claim it because I work in the same company. But it's our investment team that I said looked at this whole argument of 3 trillion will become 7 trillion. This is the journey of China when it went to 7 trillion. This is the kind of power consumption that they needed. This is the power consumption we will need. This is the power supply at this point. So by the way, power, thermal, and it was completely contrary to the thinking at that time, because a lot of people were talking about India's commitment to net zero by 2070. So the whole discussion was on renewables, and we were like, no, hang on. There's no way anybody is able to produce stuff for thermal is not going to be in the money, because it's just a sheer demand thing which is massive. So we obviously made, and a lot of the companies in that space happen to be government-owned companies, right? So that is one bet I could believe that was outsized. If I take this one step to personal, I'm quite intrigued personally right now. So we'll find out whether it will turn out to be a bet which will. I'm quite intrigued by the potential of doing Chinese equity at this point.
Okay, why?
Because Kushal, if you remember, मैंने आपको एक example दिया था कि 2 markets that have this beautiful correlation between economic growth and markets, market cap, right, which is India and US. If at all there's one country which is kind of the opposite, it is China. If you think about the last 25-30 years, nominal growth of Chinese economy, I don't know what the number is, probably 13, 14, 15%. Chinese equity market caps have probably grown 5. I'm wondering whether, as a whole consequence of the world is round, no, whether we are in for a reversal of that, where the Chinese economy may no longer grow at the same pace, but is it that China will surprise in terms of markets? That's one angle of it. The second angle of it is that, and also this is because, we are Mahindra Manulife, right? So Manulife, a lot of people don't realize, is one of the largest asset management and insurance companies in the world, one of the largest in Asia. So we have, just to give you context, operations in Philippines, Vietnam, Taiwan, Thailand, Singapore, Hong Kong, mainland China, name it, right? So you kind of, so if you think about US markets and you think about the next 5-7 years, you look at innovation, you look at technology, and I expand that to EVs, for example, the kind of cutting edge stuff that is happening in the US, there's only one country that is at par, if not better in certain degrees, that is China. Now, if I was to look at equity markets in the US in terms of price discovery of these items, you look at an Nvidia or whatever, it's priced in a lot. I wonder whether in China, actually, that is not priced in as yet, because there's been that overlay of, China government into whatever. So I'm just intrigued by the possibility, right? I mean, people argue that there are certain EV companies in China that will give the best EV companies in the world. And I'm just staying away from, I mean, this should not be a plug for my own mother promoter, but we are very, when I look at the EV company that my own promoter company has produced, right? It's world class. It's not, so the point is, if you want to invest in opportunities like that, people talk about Chinese capability on semiconductors and chips now in the last after 20 years. So I'm just wondering whether Chinese equity is a interesting play.
Which
Now-
EV company are you talking about?
No, I'm saying you look at a BYD, right?
Yeah. So it's of Manulife.
No, it's not Manulife. I'm saying, no, I was just giving you an example that there are so many interesting technology related like EV companies in China that are doing fabulous stuff. I just wonder at what point in time will their market performance show up. I mean, that's the, I would say, lateral bet I would be willing to make, not some crazy number. So we discussed now, Kushal, 80% flexi cap, multi cap, multi asset, ये excitement area में.
Which is another country that you are bullish on? China, US, India के अलावा maybe any other country that you think can do well?
So in some sense, at this time, it's probably above my pay grade, because there will always be specific opportunities. I mean, and this is not a kind of an endorsement to buy, but I was so interested. I think in January this year, we had the opportunity as AMFI to enter into a MOU with our counterpart association in Indonesia. And it was so fascinating that they also have some kind of a version of Viksit Bharat, by the way.
Oh.
Because they also had independence in, I think, 1947-48. So they are also reaching 100th year. So if you remember, the Indonesian president was the chief guest at our Republic Day this year. So their delegation had come down. So it's quite fascinating. Even they are a developing country with ambitions to become developed by that point. In context of the industry, I did feel that we were slightly ahead of them at this juncture, but like I said, I'm not giving that as an endorsement to, but I think that's an important question you raise, that over the next 5-7 years, assuming regulations open up, because today the quota on overseas feeder funds, I think beyond this advice of flexi, multi and multi-asset, if possible, 5 to 10% of your investment should be in overseas funds is a good thing for anybody to do.
So 5% should be allocated to overseas.
I would argue go as far as to say 10.
Okay.
Because ultimately the only way to make money over time, and like I told you, my description of risk is pillow, right? So the moment I have 10% allocated overseas, I'm diversifying my risk, right?
Right.
Like some of my things that make me happy is that, I continue to hold ESOP stocks in the companies I've worked in, which are still overseas stocks, and they've all done fabulously well. It's not as if only Indian equity has gone up.
Which kind of companies?
No, it's like
overseas?
Morgan Stanley, HSBC,
okay.
right? Because so it's just a perspective that we don't have the only opportunity to grow. US equities, for example, if you think about it, in the last 5 to 10 years, have perhaps been the best performing large market equity returns probably outside of India.
So you took over as the CEO of Morgan Stanley Investment Management in India in 2008, and it was like one of the toughest years. How was your entire experience at that point in time? What did you learn? You said in one of the interviews that you'd be happy even if it's a 2-3% outperformance with the benchmark in that particular year. So how was it?
It was, so Kushal, there was a context to that, because if you you won't remember, you were probably very young back then.
9 years old.
9 years old. So I will go back to before. So Morgan Stanley launched their first close-ended fund called the Morgan Stanley Growth Fund in 94, right? And long story, there were lines for people to buy, etc. And then it turned out to be one of the top. The markets were at their peak at that point, so the markets declined. After that, so though 10 rupees ka NAV, people bought thinking this is like a typical equity IPO. If you may not remember because you weren't born then, but those days there was not free market pricing like you have for IPOs now, right? So people would issue IPOs. Infosys came at 10 rupees, HDFC Bank came at 10 rupees, right? So it was very possible for a company to list at 50, 60, 100, etc. So people mistook it, the way I remember it, because I was around at that juncture, to be ऐसा ही होगा. मतलब it's a mutual fund. People tried to explain कि ये mutual fund है, but people said ये मैं 10 रुपए पे लूंगा तो it will first NAV will be 14 or something, which obviously cannot be the case. So the NAV, I think over a period of a year or two, perhaps had declined a little bit. What happened is when I joined Morgan Stanley, I took over as CEO in 2008, but I joined in 2007. And one of my mandates for joining was to restart the domestic business. It was still a very large FI. I realized that the performance since 94 till 2007, which is 13 years, was about 2-3% outperformance around the benchmark. So just imagine, Kushal, today we are discussing, should I not do passive because can you outperform? Here's a fund that was been criticized that you have not done anything, which had delivered a 3% CAGR outperformance over benchmark over 13 years. So I was like, boss, this is good. This is not bad. Right? But the problem is the expectation that it came against. It was, since my expectation was 10 will become 20, I don't have any appreciation for a 3% outperformance. That's what I was seeking to explain at that point. And also the thing is, back in those days, जैसा अभी है ना कोई फंड में ग्रोथ प्लान है, डिविडेंड प्लान है, वो जमाने में नहीं था. वो एक ही प्लान था, तो if they declared dividend, that went from that NAV. So nobody used to do that, that calculation of CAGR properly. They used to only think it 10 rupees ka NAV today is 40 rupees. Not realizing कि almost 20 रुपया तो वापस already dividend का आ गया. So if you actually reinvest it, it's worth virtually another 40.
So was it like a very tough year during 2008, especially after the financial crisis?
It was, but not. It was also, I would say, I was probably in the right company around then because we were pretty much in the crossfires, right? The global financial crisis happened in Wall Street. You're working in a Wall Street firm. But no, it was a wonderful place to be. I mean, it's probably the one standout company I've worked with.
What were your key learnings?
No, whole host. It's a organization that I mean, it's. I think the motto is not. It is like do first class things for clients in a first class way. I mean, that's just the DNA of that firm that was there.
What's the most interesting project you would have worked on back in those days?
Some of it I can't. It's like, it's just the way the firm thought about investment management. So it was like a complete 360 degree.
Any memorable story or interaction you remember?
No, so like I said, it's the memorable story is mostly because of the 360 degree. So it's about, how can you create investment management capability in real estate, infrastructure, private equity, public markets, for local clients, offshore clients. And I think the one thing I will say memorable is that the way that operated, I think they still do it, is that any client dealing with the Mumbai office, I think would have no difference in their thinking of dealing between Mumbai and New York. That's the way that firm operated. That whether if you walk into the Mumbai office or you walked into the New York headquarters, you walked into the London office, it is Morgan Stanley. That is a learning that I got to know pretty much. I was surprised by that, because typically, you think that ultimately this is India, this is Mumbai, it's a subset of Asia, Asia is a subset of international is a subset of global. But Morgan Stanley never worked like that. It was, for a client, you come and work and talk to a Morgan Stanley guy in Mumbai, it should be exactly the same as, and there was a lot of things that were done to make sure that happened.
Right. Thank you so much for doing this. It was super insightful. I have one last question, which is a tricky one. I ask all my guests. If you were in the shoes of Kushal Lodha and if you were interviewing Mr. Anthony, what is one question you'd like to ask him towards the end?
when are you likely to retire, I guess.
So when are you likely to retire?
I don't know, Kushal. I'll tell you that's a bit of a deliberate answer I've given you. Assuming that my wife or some of my close friends will watch this, they will be like, you are the biggest liar. You said you'll retire when you're 40. Then when we asked you, you said, nahi, you know, ye wo 45, then 50. And now I've completely reversed saying, I will retire when I stop enjoying it. I don't know, Kushal, if you've seen, and maybe if you have the time, please do. On my LinkedIn profile, my description, firstly, I do not write the title of my job. I write investment management professional, and I've written a particular line because we didn't I read, I am one of those few people who love what I do and get paid very well for it. And I learned this from a couple of sportsmen. As you know, I'm a very big sports fan. A lot of sports people say that, right? This is blessing. I get to play sport and I love playing sport, and it's a sport that pays very well. And I remember when I kept hearing these people, मुझे लगा बस ये मेरे लिए भी true है. Like, just think about it. I am honored and blessed to be in a position where the work I do can change the lives of people. Right? And I really enjoyed doing it. I mean, people may argue you're not a social worker, but I believe we are social workers in that sense. So the day so then I've changed, you know, when I said 40 and 45, those were all typical wo jo fire wala concept rehta na, because that was all related to money. I'll have enough money, then I don't need to work, those kind of things. Now it is like saying, boss, as long as I come to work every morning smiling ki boss, I can make a difference, that's fine. One day I have a feeling it will stop. That day I'll retire.
Social workers who are being paid very well. That's
it is a fact. It is a fact.
Right.
It is a fact.
But thank you so much, sir, for doing this. Kushal. It was amazing talking to you. Didn't realize how we spent 2.5 hours.
Oh, is it 2.5 hours?
Yeah. Okay. And I had like an amazing time. Got to learn a lot of things, even apart from investing mutual funds. I think learned a lot of things about life lessons and principles. So thank you so much for doing this, and wish you the best in your endeavors.
No, Kushal, thank you. And like I said, you asked the controversial question, but I think folks like you are doing an amazing job because, like I said, I'm not the most avid reader, but I'm a massive podcast listener. And offline we can discuss the podcast I listen to yours as well, as you know.
Oh wow, thank you so much. Means a lot.
It's been an absolute pleasure and honor talking to you as well.
Thank you so much for doing this once again, and can't wait to like see what all is there in the future in the pipeline as well. But thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you, Kushal.
Thanks. अगर आपको ये वीडियो पसंद आया होगा तो I'll request you to share it with all your friends and subscribe to our channel so that we can give you more value additive content in the shortest amount of time. हमको ये बताइए कि आपको कौन से kind of guest चाहिए, हमको ये बताइए कि कौन से questions मुझे नहीं पूछने चाहिए थे, कौन से questions मुझे और पूछने चाहिए थे ताकि आपको और ज्यादा वैल्यू मिल सके, और कौन से ऐसे पार्ट्स है जो आपको बिल्कुल पसंद नहीं आए ताकि हम लोग ये पार्ट स्ट्रीम कर सकते फ्यूचर एपिसोड्स में. So thank you so much once again for watching this episode, and keep sharing all our episodes with your friends and keep giving us feedback so that we can improve and come up with better quality content.